the people in as they arrive because we've got our guest speaker on the call. So I can relax now. Okay, so first of all, apologies that Jonathan's not here today. He's got a family emergency that he needs to be elsewhere. So I'm hoping that everything's okay with him, and sure you are too. If um, if you want to make sure that your organisation's also on your name, that will help enormously. So people know where everyone is coming from. But I'd like to. So I wasn't expecting to chair this until 7:20 this morning. Okay, so the main item on today's agenda is we're joined by Dan Woolley from Stir to Action. And some of you, I think, were at the Democratic Business Summit yesterday that's been organised by another part of Stir to Action, the event that was in Cardiff. So it's great to have Dan with us. Dan, I think you're going to be presenting. I can't see you now on my screen. Have I made? Oh no, I can. You're right in the middle. You moved because other people have come in. So you're presenting on an opportunity that Johnny's put to the CCIN to support the ABCs of community assets. It's a sponsorship opportunity, and you kindly agreed to come along today to tell us more about it, to see what interest there is. Feedback from someone. I think that might be Rachel. Rachel Barlow. Okay, Dan, do you want to introduce yourself? I've enabled it so that you can share your screen.
Great. Thanks, Nick, and hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting me here. It's really great to be here, and yeah, I definitely recognise a few faces on this Zoom call. One or two of you are probably new to me. So for those who don't know, I'm Dan and I'm from Stir to Action. Hopefully, if you don't know me personally, you do know the organisation. If you don't, I'll just give you a very quick summary of who we are and what we do, which is a cooperative, and we do a lot of work around the UK, essentially working with cooperatives, community businesses, social enterprises, charities, and so on. We see ourselves as kind of a capacity builder organisation, and we've done a lot of work also over the years with clients like local authorities, like charitable foundations, a lot of public bodies, central government, and so on. And one of the things we've been doing for the last several years is really trying to look at the issue of community ownership. And I say cooperatives, of course, example of community-owned businesses, but we're really now got a strong focus on assets. And I'm sure everyone on this call probably knows the importance and all the work that's gone on around assets. A lot of the news that's been happening probably the last kind of 5-10 years around the loss of assets. So many of those will be assets that have been lost by local authorities, but also kind of community organisations and even charities have been kind of forced to sell off assets. So we're one of those organisations that's trying to reverse that trend, looking at what we can do to put more assets into the hands of community ownership. So with that in mind, one of the things that we're doing right now is we're preparing a training programme to run next year that will be essentially a 10-part programme looking at different aspects of the journey that the people need to go on in order to kind of gain ownership of assets. And when we talk, the audiences of this training are anybody from, community-based groups themselves. So it could be community organisations in your kind of catchment area. But we also see lots of this training will be of benefit to the staff of local authorities, to grantees of charitable foundations, to trustees of those foundations, and so on. So it's quite a wide audience. There is a 10-part programme, and I can run you through that in just a moment, looking at the different workshops that we're offering. But really, as I say, this is about empowering people to take ownership of assets. Now, it's worth saying that we look at assets in 3 different types based on the ownership. So as I say, the first one is probably assets that the council themselves, the local authority holds, but is looking at kind of a different solution for the long-term ownership and governance of those assets. The other set of assets are those that are currently in private ownership, but there is an opportunity for the community to take them on. Again, I think most should be aware of the Community Ownership Fund, which is obviously a big government-backed scheme to put power in hands of communities. Unfortunately, on pause right now, but we are hoping that comes back online. And in the meantime, what we want to do is make sure that as many community groups out there are empowered to kind of take advantage of that scheme when it relaunches. And I think I mentioned that the third class of assets are assets that are effectively already in some kind of community ownership or owned by a charity, but they're at risk. So we need to find a new solution of those. What we're really trying to prevent is kind of more and more assets being lost to communities because they're being sold into kind of private hands or private developers. Just before, I'm just going to pause a second. I don't know how, Nicola, you want to, but is there any questions based on what I've said so far, or do you want me to kind of get to the end of this section and then take questions all in one? Nicola, are you able to respond to that? You're on mute.
Unmute myself.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's. I've just got my colleague trying to drop off the call. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to work out what that means. Is that conversation for you to have, Morgan?
Apologies, I thought I put a comment in to go straight to Spencer, the way I've done it in the messages. So I was just trying to
right, okay.
Outside meeting, apologies. I'll drop Spencer an email now. Probably the easiest way of doing it if that's confusing things. Sorry.
Okay, super. Sorry, Dan. So has anybody got any questions about how this fits in with the other work that Stir to Action's doing so that we can hear what the proposal is? No, carry on, Dan.
Oh, so I was on mute then. I'm just going to share my screen briefly. I did want to check, Nicola, I know we sent you and Jonathan some slides. I don't know if they've been shared with the kind of wide...
No, I've done it so you can share them now.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think so.
Give me two.
I'd seen them because I put the item on the agenda. Whether Jonathan then sent them out, I don't know.
We did get some slides.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. Too many hats.
Okay. So I'll just, in that case, given that you've received the slides, I'll just whiz through them really quickly, and then just check we can all see this. So this slide that I said, I'll whiz through it really quickly because you can all read these slides afterwards in more detail. You might have read them already. So I think we probably all know what community assets are. We've just given a bit of an example in this slide. So, you know, it really is a very broad definition that what we consider community assets have covered everything from, you know, community centres, pubs, green spaces, music venues, social clubs, skate parks, blah, blah, blah. There's some amazing examples that some of you be aware of. You know, Kitty's Laundrette is one of the ones featured in this photo, Stretford Public Hall. We've got Project PT, which is a gym. So really, really broad range. And it's kind of really exciting to see all the kind of community initiatives that have been set up to take on management of assets. What we want to do is just look back and capture some statistics. And again, I'm sure these will be familiar to some of you. You know, 97% of assets have been sold into private ownership since 2010. It's not a great story. So there's a real need here to kind of reverse that trend. And again, we feel that there is the appetite out there, there's the opportunity there, but a lot of the groups that we've worked with over the last 5 years in our assessment. So one example, we've been working with Local Trust under contract to the big local partnership, 150 community organisations around the country, been given £1 million of funding. A lot of them were very interested in taking on assets, but really the assessment is a lot of them just didn't have the skills or the capacity to do that. So Local Trust have been great at kind of supporting those organisations, but as we get to the end of the 10 years, we still see that a lot of those big local groups have not been able to acquire the assets, either due to lack of funding, I'd say lack of capacity, lack of skills, and so on. So we're kind of looking to pick up where Local Trusts are leaving off and plug some of those gaps that have emerged as part of the learning from that programme. Next. So what is the ABCs of Community Assets? The ABCs of Community Assets is the name of our training programme that sets out to kind of reverse that trend. So we've got 10 workshops. We've got 10 workshops all happen online, and we did that delivery. Stir to Action in the past has done a lot of in-person workshops, and we're very keen to do more of those. But because this is a national program that rather than specifically place-based, we do want to make sure that everyone around the UK has the opportunity to join, and therefore we're focusing online initially. But in addition to the online workshops, we are going to do free in-person study visits. So the locations of those have yet to be announced, but those study visits will centre around the community asset. So if we say, for example, Stretford Public Hall, there will be a visit to that asset. There'll be a talk from the organisation that took on and ran that asset, and then some sort of workshops built into the day. So probably about a half day on those study visits. Stir to Action will run all of the workshops alongside specific experts. So for each of the workshops we do and the thematic focus of that workshop, we will bring in a local expert as well. In terms of sponsorship, what we're looking for from both, well, this is a conversation to be having today, from either CCIN as a group or individual local authorities, or both of those, the way that we're looking for sponsorship is effectively sponsorship as a means of you securing training places on these workshops for your stakeholders. And I say, how we define stakeholders, partly down to you, but in the terms of local authorities, we think it could be staff, it could be councillors, probably more relevant, it's the community organisations in your networks. And you will obviously know your patch better than anyone else, but the community organisations in your networks who you feel might be in need of some capacity building in order to take on and manage assets. This is an example of some of the workshops. I will say these slides are tiny bit out of date. I've got a separate slide which has now the 10 confirmed workshops. So I'll just skip over that in a moment when I finish these slides. In terms of why, I think I've gone through this. These are the reasons why, we think the benefits of becoming a sponsor. And then just a summary of who the previous sponsors I've worked with in the past. So the pricing of sponsorship, we've got different levels, and obviously organisations come in at different levels. It's about £80 per training place. So one place on one workshop would be £80. And then there's kind of different tiers of sponsorship there. Is it useful at this point for me just to run through the kind of 10 different workshops, you get a flavour of what it is that we're actually offering?
Just while you're just before you move on to that, so just to be clear, when you're talking about the different place-based workshops, then
Yes.
though they're going to be fixed on a particular day, the other things, are they online or are they in person?
Yeah, good question. So the place-based visits, what we call study visits, will be in a particular location on a particular day. And those dates will all be announced before Christmas. We're just finalising those now, so we can send an email with those dates and locations. In terms of the online workshops, they will also be a particular date. So the workshops will be online. They will be on fixed dates and fixed times. They're roughly 3 hours each, the online workshops. So we can confirm the dates of all of those again ASAP. Is that answering your question, Nicola?
Yeah, and who's the target audience?
It will vary by workshop. So why don't I move on now to the other slide?
Okay. Yeah.
And then we can look at that, because it's a really good question. And in some cases, the target audience will be the same. And with some specific workshops, there'll be a slightly different target audience. So give me 1 second just to move on to this. I apologise that this second slide is not, it's just a Word document at the moment, so it doesn't look beautifully presented, but it will give you an idea of what we're offering. Can you all see this Word document?
Yeah.
Excellent. Sorry, yeah, this is me being less familiar with Zoom and more familiar with Google Meet. But so you can see here 10 different courses that we're offering, from community assets to crash course all the way down. Yeah. So as I say, in the majority of cases, the common stakeholder group for most of these courses will be community organisations in your networks. So that could be charities, so the VCSE sector. So it could be charities, social enterprises, community benefit societies, cooperative societies, and so on. Any place-based organisation that may be in the process or have the future potential to take on and run an asset. In addition, Some of these will be directly relevant to, you know, council staff. So when we look at community assets, a crash course, I'm aware there'll be people within the councils who have a very different level of knowledge. So that is a very much an introductory course. No, but if someone is within the council is not that familiar with the kind of process of assets and the kind of challenges around community ownership of assets, that would still be very relevant to a member of the council staff. But as I say, there'll be members of certain council staff who just have far more familiarity with the processes, and therefore that course is irrelevant. Running the campaign, Save Your Community Asset, that's more directly targeted at the community groups. Engaging local people, again, community groups. Designing the right structure for community asset will be all about the kind of right legal structures and kind of models of governance that we can advise groups on. You know, for example, what are the advantages of being a community benefit society in terms of managing an asset and say accessing community shares as part of your financial mix versus say being a charity that would allow you to access grant funding and so on. So again, that might be relevant to council staff as well as to community organisations. The fifth one, unlock a community asset transfer from your local authority. Well, that's definitely from both sides of the coin. I mean, it's likely that one of the experts that we bring in to deliver that workshop alongside us will themselves be the member of a local authority, because of course they're the ones most familiar with the process. And it's really about educating the community groups, both on how that process works, what they need to do, but also how to work more effectively with the council. So yeah, I think without going through them all again one by one, it's the kind of VCSE sector is a primary target, but council staff are definitely a secondary beneficiary. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Excellent. Any questions?
I've got a question. So one of my conversations with Johnny was about external organisations that officers will be working with might also. That's why there were so many places being offered.
Yeah.
So it was like a lot of partner organisations. Is that still the case, or is that specific? So are you saying different people, you buy so many places and it's just a mix?
Can you just, Nicola, give me an example of a partner organisation that you might have in mind?
I did. This is Johnny telling me. So residence groups. He was talking to me about, you might be working with, say, a group that's looking to there's an old building in the town that a group of residents are looking at taking over, and therefore it wouldn't be the council that would be doing that, but there might be some skills that they would want to support the residents getting in order to do that. Yeah,
absolutely. So a residents association, I would class broadly as part of the VCSE sector. So if any given council or CCIN as a whole was sponsoring the programme, the idea would be that you would effectively be purchasing a number of training places and you could allocate them as you see fit. So if within your locale, the most appropriate recipient of that training was a residents association or the members of that residents association, then absolutely you would effectively be purchasing training places on behalf of that group, and you would allocate the training places to that residents association.
Thank you. Arfan?
Thanks, Nicola. No, thanks to Dan for the presentation. Very interesting, especially in Llanelli, where we've had a lot of asset transfer from our county council to our town council. But just wanted to tease out of Dan, how relevant or how much information or how is it reflective of the slightly different demographic and legal position here in Wales? Just thinking of things like the FGen Act and the power of competence for local town and community councils, and how we are working with organisations. Just in Carmarthenshire and West Wales, got an organisation called PlanNed, which do similar work, working with communities on asset transfer. Just wondering, how reflective of the Welsh situation some of these training schemes that you've got there are, please, Dan.
Thanks, Aaron. I mean, that's a brilliant question. And the honest answer is I need to look into it, because I had a similar question outside this presentation from someone in Scotland, because obviously the legal position there is different as well. and has been. We just finished a project around community ownership of farmland, and again we encountered very much the need to make sure that the kind of advice and training that we're looking at the next stage is reflective of the different policy and position within the kind of devolved nation. So it's a brilliant question. In all honesty, I don't want to give you a half-baked answer now. So if it's okay, I'll take that question back to my colleagues and come back to you. But it's definitely something that we need to clarify. So thank you for raising that. I think we have another question from, sorry, I can't see your first name. I can see your surname is Stringfellow.
Yeah, it's Rachel. My question is, are you going to make a distinction in the programme between seeking to acquire an asset that is owned by, let's say, a private operator, maybe a pub, something like that, and a council asset? Because obviously, as council officers, we are working within a statutory framework where there are certain considerations that would need to be taken into account for any council decision on transfer of an asset. So are you going to make that quite clear that that's sort of working with two very different contexts?
Absolutely. And again, a brilliant question. So you're absolutely right. In each of the workshops, we make it really clear. We always have a format for the workshop, which is, who is this for? What will you learn and what will you need to kind of be, a kind of starting point to make this workshop relevant to you? And when we do that first workshop, which is a crash course in community assets, the kind of first part of that workshop, especially people at the kind of beginning of their journey, is understanding exactly what you said, the difference between, because the starting point is the same, isn't it? If you want to secure an asset for your community, much of the process is similar, but the dividing point comes in private versus publicly owned. Or as I said at the beginning, there is a third category of asset, which is ones that are held already in community ownership, but at risk. So if you think of where I live in Cumbria, now Westmoreland-in-Furness, the Coronation Hall in Ulverston was held in community ownership and did a fantastic job for a number of years until COVID. And then the long tail of COVID meant that they really struggled to maintain it. So there's a question now, can it effectively be transferred from one community group to another? Or does it have to go back to the council, or will it go into private ownership? So we're looking at those three different categories. Assets held by the local authority, assets in private ownership, and assets already in community or charity ownership. But yeah, it's an excellent question. And each of the 10 workshops will either be relevant to all of those, we'll do our best to kind of encompass more, or some of them will be very specific. So one of those workshops I mentioned about how to negotiate an asset transfer from your local authority will be irrelevant if the asset you're interested in is in private ownership. Make sense? I hope I've not kind of mumbled that too much, but the short answer to your question, Rachel, is yes, we will at every point make the distinction along the journey between a privately held asset and one that's owned by the council. Yeah, Rachel again.
Yeah, just to follow up a bit on that. I mean, there is a statutory framework, and I'm sure officers on the call will be familiar with the wellbeing criteria under, I think it's section 123 of the LGA Act 1972. But that doesn't mean that all councils approach this in the same way. So I suppose that there'll be value in explaining to participants the framework within which we're working, but that doesn't create a consistency of approach across the country, because the objectives and the policy objectives of different councils will differ. Their desire to release assets or not will differ depending on perhaps the development prospects with respect to those assets. So there's an awful lot of local context, which is highly relevant. We were looking, because we were actually attempting at the moment to develop a policy in this area. And we've been looking at a few policies that other local authorities have. And I think there was clearly a push probably about 10 years ago, or maybe a bit more now, when government funding to local authorities just crashed so totally following the election of the coalition government in 2010. And in fact, I was at a unitary then, and we were trying to push assets out into community ownership to try and save money, essentially. But in a different context now, I'm now in a district authority. Many assets have potential development value. So there's a very different context. So I think it's important that in the training you do, that you are emphasizing that every area, every council will approach this differently. So there isn't. I think there was one of the titles for the session was unlocking a community asset from your local authority, which sort of almost suggests this. Give you the magic key, and you'll get your community asset, which is perhaps risk of being a bit simplistic.
No, I totally agree. And you've made some really excellent points there. Thank you. The reality of this training and in terms of what we're being realistic in what we expect to achieve, these are a series of 3 hours workshops, and it's really it's partly to set people on the journey. We know there's going to be a lot of follow-up needed. And also another reality is we know right now the funding landscape is quite difficult. So, with the community ownership fund being on pause, there are other sources. So, other grant funding is out there. There are, we're huge advocates of community shares, but they have a limitation. We know the data suggests, for example, that community shares tend to work well in more affluent neighborhoods and so on, not exclusively, but so on. But whatever we achieve within the scale and the scope of these training workshops, there's going to be a lot of follow-on needed. So our hope is partly that we kind of, begin the conversation and set some community organizations on their journey. But in the background, we're currently now applying for funding to do next stage place-based training and hopefully have more funding to do one-to-one capacity building. So just like I've been doing for the big local program funded by local trust, we do a lot of in-depth one-to-one support. So, I can spend kind of 5 to 10 days with each group, whether it's charity, whatever, and that is useful. If these workshops just kind of reached a dead end and then we left groups on their own, I would be disappointed because I would not expect them to be able to achieve much on their own beyond this. So we're seeing this as kind of the starting point of a much deeper program of work. Yeah. Is that okay, Rachel? Do you think brilliant? Okay. Any other questions from the group? No. Okay, would it be useful for me to follow up with some quick email information? I say we're really keen to understand if any of you are interested in becoming a program sponsor, if you feel it's going to be particularly relevant to the kind of third sector of the VCSE groups in your local authority areas and/or yourselves as staff. So I'll follow up via email. And again, if you have any questions, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. I'm very happy to answer those.
Thank you, Dan. I think that's a good plan. If you send the stuff through to me, and we'll make sure it gets out to everybody. And I think if you leave the call now, we'll just have a chat and see what people think rather than putting you on the spot there.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks again all for your time, and
all right.
Hopefully see you soon.
Oh, just one more thing I just wanted to mention. You mentioned local trust.
Yes.
We've got a spin out of local trust that is it's a company called 3NI that are joining as an affiliate member. I don't know if you've come across them. I'm just trying to have a quick look to see what 3NI stood for, but I haven't got it in front of me. So we'll be announcing that one probably in the next newsletter. So yeah, lots of affiliate members working together as well, which is good.
Fantastic. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Views, comments, opinions? Do you think it's something that we should fund? Come on, there's people on this call that aren't normally quiet.
I'll just say that I think it sounds very interesting. Obviously, we've previously had, so in Cardiff, we're the largest community asset transfer in Wales, and the chief exec, I want to say, of the community organisation spoke previously at a CCN event. So, but I know that they have sort of struggled with, just getting that kind of
Insall Trust.
In Insall Court, yeah.
Insall Court,
yeah. I think, Insall Trust who run Insall Court, yes, yeah.
Big issue for me.
Yeah, so I think there could well be interest from there within Cardiff.
How is that? It is it?
We need to have enough people to support it to warrant the sponsorship, obviously. But I think I can certainly make some inquiries. I think there could well be some interest.
Okay. Yeah. What's the general view? I mean, these things, when it's a cross organisation thing, I have to say it's like herding cats, trying to get people to either say yes they want something and yes they are going to put their name down for it. So I just like a general view about whether you think it's a good thing, Rachel.
Yeah, I think it probably is. Are they, just to clarify, are they seeking sponsorship from CCIN? So is there an ask for CCIN to put some money in the pot?
Yeah, so they're it's anybody. I think they're after. I saw Preston Council's name was put up on the screen as a previous funder. I think it's if it's a CCIM one, then obviously somebody needs to manage those places. If 10 councils said they'd like 5 places each, then that needs to be managed. The only thing that I'm always wary of is that we've done training with Stir to Action before that sort of opens the door, and this is a what you could do, but you then have to pay more money if you want to actually achieve what you thought you were going to be able to be told. So but I don't know if anybody else has received that training, or what if they've had the same experience. We'd obviously have to put a deadline on this for filling places before we committed and asked the board to fund. I think it started at about 2k. Has anybody got the presentation in front of them? Just I think it was 2k for, I don't know, it was £80 a time, wasn't it? £80 a place. And there might be some of those courses that you talked about that are more interesting than others. I'm just trying to get a gut if everybody's going, oh yes, it's brilliant, I would really love to do that, or yeah, thanks, let's move on. I'm not getting much.
Sorry to be unhelpful, Nicola. Just to say, I had a couple of calls at the start of the meeting, so I missed the introduction. So
Okay.
I need to go back and look at the notes when they come out. I know it's something as a council we're interested in. Exactly.
Okay.
Whether that specific offer is something we want to take up. I need to talk with colleagues. So I'm being unhelpful. Sorry, I missed the start of the call.
Okay, no problems. Arfon?
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. I'm not sure whether we'd be interested in Llanelli, simply because I don't think we've got the organisations within the town who would have the capacity to do the asset transfer. It's been very much looked at the town council to do that on behalf of the community.
Yeah.
So I'm not certain it would be something we would look to roll out, because a lot of these organisations, they're interested in their specific projects, their work they're doing, and they wouldn't look to do anything of that sort of scale. But perfectly interesting. But as I said in my question, we would want to be clear that it's covering the unique legal situation for Wales. I'm sure Fiona be in the same position in Cardiff as well.
Yes, I agree 100%. Yeah, that's definitely provided.
Okay, Nicola?
Yeah, similar point of view here. I think one of the issues for us is the fact that a lot of the assets of sort of genuine value and use that can be put to sort of good, effective uses in the community have already been sold off. So that leaves an asset base that isn't necessarily as attractive as it once was. And we've also got a dearth of skills in the community to be able to sort of take on board and manage some of those assets. And then an additional layer on top of that is that we don't have much capacity in the council to then support those community groups and individuals to take on and manage those assets effectively. So in some cases, in the past, what I hear is that assets have been handed out to the community, but then not effectively managed, and then come back into the local authority in a worse state. So at the moment, I'm not sure that there's a huge amount of appetite here unless something changes to do a significant amount of work. So at the moment, what we have is a situation where everything is done on the basis of, if something comes into the authority, we look at it on a case-by-case basis. So for us at the moment, I'm not sure that there would be sort of a great deal of interest.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. Ash, you're, I think you as a council, did you transfer like something like 25, 30 community hubs out, or?
Yes, and to be honest, I'm probably not the right person to tell you any more detail about that. So one of my things was I was going to take that away and have a conversation with somebody else who could.
Yeah,
but,
I think a conversation with your former leader was during COVID. Let's say there were 25 of them, 24 of them that only one out of the 25 remained in council ownership. And that was the only one that asked for some extra support during COVID. The other 24 that have been transferred seemed to fly because it had a different approach to what it was doing. So I'd say that you've got some brilliant examples, and I think your examples are in the asset transfer pack, along with Insol Court, that the Cardiff example. Connell?
Yeah, I just want to apologise for being late for the meeting. I was in another meeting for there. But yeah, just to answer that as well, we found it quite an interesting dynamic between the directorates about asset transfers as well. We had quite where the place directorate tried to sort of dominate the field in that as well. And when, say, the community group came saying, you know, what assets are available, they said, well, none of them are available. We were saying, no, we're quite desperate to support the community. But they said, actually, no, it needs to be thinking about regeneration, development from there as well. So I think there's a lot of internal discussion about, you know, the balance between supporting communities, our ability to improve people's lives, and also the ability of the assets to be then transformed into, say, a regenerative development, something that we could see maybe for sale rather than something that could be transferred from there. That's just as a Trafford example from that case.
That's a really good point there, and it makes me think, I wonder whether what we actually need is a session for local authorities, because of the dynamics that you're having. Sometimes council departments are quite siloed and they all have different objectives. So some good examples of where that's working, but an honest discussion about the things that are challenges. Because I can see a few heads nodding. There's got to be some experts amongst all you wonderful, wonderful local authorities that are doing this exceptionally well. Okay, so I'll circulate the note that I get from Dan, and then we'll put a deadline on it to see what people think. But I'll also mention to Jonathan that this other option of, you know, do we do something? Is it worth having an online session to share some of those examples? And get some speakers in, and then asking for some ideas for speakers. Okay, thank you very much. We're a little bit behind the agenda. The Democratic Business Summit feedback. I think some of you had a brilliant day in Cardiff yesterday. Could you just let me know who it was that attended? Simon, looks like it's over to you then, Simon.
Yeah, there were a few others, but I haven't made the call. It was very nice. It was, you know, it's good day, good to check in with a few people and catch up on things. Lot of discussion around the sort of commitment to double the size of the democratic economy. What does that mean? What does that actually look like? Just sort of splitting off into roundtable discussions around what does a proper ecosystem of support for democratic business look like? What evidence is needed to influence sort of policy shifts, and kind of beyond that, what investment might be needed? Haven't fully digested it all. I was sort of suffering from a bit of a flu on the way down, so I'm still a little bit full of cold. But yeah, I mean the discussions I was involved in were around sort of what should the ecosystem of support look like. A lot of this probably quite familiar to a lot of people, but you know, we talked about the importance of the movement speaking to kind of mainstream business, as well as just the sort of, you know, what might be perceived, I guess, as sort of more lifestyle choice based organizational structures. You know, at the moment, I don't think it's fully speaking to that sort of productive entrepreneurial side of the economy, and so that feels like a window of opportunity that I think the movement kind of struggles to place itself into that conversation. We had some interesting discussions. We had somebody from a local enterprise partnership, from the Oxfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership, on our table, and that's clearly one space where these models aren't often being discussed and presented at the point of sort of business inception. A lot of discussion about the sort of lack of kind of specialist support that's out there when it comes to things like tax, HR advice. There are, you know, very small number and dwindling, aging group of sort of professionals who have that expertise. So there's a need for that to be invested in when looking at that ecosystem. I think something that kind of came up on our table was, and this is something that I think the movement struggles to do, probably for good reason, but you know, sometimes we're not naming the problem with the opposite when talking about the, you know, the benefit of more democratic, more equal forms of business. We're not saying what's wrong with other forms of business and why you might want to choose this over an alternative form, and that's something that I think, you know, potentially will appeal to a generation of you know, young people who are coming through, who are more value or looking for sort of value-led opportunities, and you know, how can that sort of be better articulated? We talked about, you know, perhaps there's sort of a more neutral framing that isn't sort of explicitly anti-capitalist, but is talking about, you know, business that operates for the common good versus business that operates for private gain. That's a sort of fairly safe dividing line to start to draw. We talked about what else have we got? Yeah, we also talked about, you know, when you're looking at this as an ecosystem, what are the, you know, how is this knowledge and expertise kind of percolating down to community anchor organizations that are sort of speaking directly to communities who might not feel like the co-op movement or the democratic business sector is really speaking directly to them, or kind of understand, you know, it is, and looking around the room, it's a fairly old white group of people, and so, you know, where are the opportunities to kind of grow knowledge and expertise in these things within sort of community anchor organizations, and that's something that shouldn't be lost. There's the other panel discussion that I was a part of was talking about what's the evidence that the sector needs to be pushing to really get the message out about why this is different and why it does speak more directly to the common good. We talked about evidence. You know, there's plenty of evidence out there, but it's about sort of providing a consistency of message and really hammering that home with ministers and with at the local government level, really sort of embedding that in our economic strategies, in community strategies. So really sort of identifying that these are more resilient forms of business. They're more productive. They're more equal. And there are lots and lots of secondary measurable benefits, once you do give people more autonomy over, how their work life is structured. They do learn new skills. They choose to engage in different things, and so those are some of the things that democratic business can bring. We talked a bit about the outlandish IPPR report, which provides a sort of framework for measuring those benefits. It's talked about as a framework for sort of procurement assessment, but we thought potentially there's some value in having some kind of consistent aggregation of evidence for the impact of the sector as a whole. So kind of outside of procurement necessarily. But yeah, that sort of need for kind of policy strategy level recognition of the distinct value of these forms of organizing feels like an important step in kind of unlocking various enabling things. But yeah, I'll stop there. I mean, that was sort of a few of the takeaways. Yeah, always good to kind of feel the energy in the room, which did slightly dwindle over the course of the day. We were sort of trapped in a suite at the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. But yeah, it was yeah, all good, all good.
Thanks, Simon. Was it, following on from the first presentation, was it? I mean, I think these things are always good to have the opportunity to see other colleagues face to face. And I'm sure you'd agree with that, because we don't get to see each other post COVID. Everything's online now, isn't it? So, and it's obviously cheaper. So,
it was great. I mean, I did come away with a slight sense that this was a conversation I had had a few times before. It sort of, where are we impacting? I think there was a renewed sense that there is a government that is listening to some extent, but as is often the case, getting cooperators to agree on what the message should be is not necessarily straightforward. So yeah, a lot of talk around these things. It'd be interesting to see what the sort of outputs of the event are, and whether that can be sort of boiled down to some concrete policy asks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anybody got any questions for Simon Morgan?
Hey, thanks for that, Simon. Really, yeah, I would have liked to have got to that session, but wasn't able to. But basically, yeah, I take your point on this as a conversation that's been had before, but it's quite a timely one at the same time. And more of a comment than a question, but I was really pleased to see the seminar going on the 17th about the AI Policy Lab and what's come out of that. And I'd be really keen to see something similar for the cooperative toolkit in the new year. And I know we had the Co-ops UK presentation on their draft strategy consultation, but even something on what's coming out of that, because there's a whole thing of nationally what Labour want to do with cooperatives, what we all want to do with cooperatives, how we actually make that meaningful and practical in our authorities is kind of the bit that I had a meeting before this with our business support unit on how we can do this better. And I need that seminar to bring them to kind of have that wider discussion and try and have more of us in the room with them saying, this is how this works, this is how we can sell it. And the toolkit that John's done is really useful. But I think a kind of seminar to launch that the same way to bring these conversations out would be helpful.
Yeah, it's on the list. Honest. Okay. I'll quickly move on to the Ministry of Justice. I was absolutely gobsmacked, I think is the best way of saying it, that somebody from the Ministry of Justice had tracked us down and was asking us if we would like to participate in a prevention project. The session is happening next Monday. and I put something in. I put something in the WhatsApp, and they were looking for people that could present on examples. But if anybody's she's still chasing me, even though she set me a ridiculous deadline of last Friday to reply to her, and I put it on the chat straight away. They're also looking at doing some visits tomorrow, but I didn't get any responses to that, so I can't tell you where they're going. But I thought that actually having somebody that was that keen to listen, it seems to be a government that's really keen to engage with local government, and keen to listen and seek views. I did then on the 2nd, whenever that day was, Monday, send a questionnaire that they've asked for local authorities to reply to. I did ask her if she had it in a questionnaire format rather than a Word document that you had to put your names in, and I think she thought I was talking gobbledygook. So that's not how the tech side doesn't seem to have reached government yet. So it is quite a boring Word document to complete. But we have been asked for views. So if anybody hasn't received that, I sent it out to all the officer leads on Monday, which is quite a big group. If you're on the call or you want me to forward it to somebody else, message me or send me an email, and I'll send that straight back to you. Or if you're on the call now, stick it in the chat and I'll make a note. So I think that Hull has definitely asked somebody to reply to it. Nathan Turner from Hull. Is anybody else intending to reply to the questionnaire? And I didn't know whether what I should have done was sent it to leaders. So that was the other thing. So Morgan, you're replying. Nicola?
I've sent it on to our community safety head of service, and also to our corporate sort of data lead as well, because I thought that the questions really straddled both, and I thought it was a really good opportunity for them to have some input.
Brilliant, thank you. Fiona? And it did include Wales, didn't it?
It did include Wales. I was
and combined authorities.
Yeah, because I had to be honest, I assumed it was England only at first. Thinking about Wales, I was like, oh, I've got to do some work now. Yeah, similar to Nicola, I've sent it on to our head of youth justice service in Cardiff, and also we're doing lots of recommend prevention, as sure most councils are, in many different angles. I've sent it to other people in the authority who I think might be interested, but yeah, I'm dependent on them. But I think it's interesting proposal.
Yeah, thank you. We'll move on to the next item. Cooperative updates from members. Has anybody got an update on anything? I've got a list as long as my arm, so I'll Morgan.
Sorry, me again. Basically, a couple of things. Just the last meeting, we had a discussion about policy labs and basically people's experience of being engaged with running policy labs, reporting on them, but also just reusing the policy labs that have been published in the past. I have had comments back from various people on the call, but basically just a reminder that if you can get back to me on the email I sent out, I'll resend it after this meeting. Actually, probably a sensible thing to do. But anyone who's not got back to me on that, I'd really appreciate your thoughts. And what we intend to do is kind of collate and analyse those. Analyse is a strong word. Collate and pull those all together and look at the learning coming out of those over Christmas. So at the January call of this meeting, I can kind of present back to you what I've heard back from people, and then just test whether that feels reasonable to people. If there are recommendations we'd want to raise coming out of that. And then the intention is to basically have a workshop at the conference in February to kind of have a bit of a wider discussion, involve members as well in understanding this is the experience we've all had on policy labs, and therefore this is what we're suggesting to kind of move this forward and to ensure that they remain a useful tool for the network. So I'll resend that email, but get back to me on that, please. And the other thing is I did also send out an email about our current policy prototype on civic crowdfunding with a couple of questions. And so really this is a plea. If there is lead people in your organisations for civic crowdfunding, either put them in touch with me or just give me their email, and I'll cold call them very happily and just kind of get their feedback on what we're doing and get a few alternative views rather than the prototype just being what Cheshire West and Chester have done. The more we can include a few perspectives in that, I think the more useful a report it will be. So, yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Morgan. Updates from anybody else? Connell.
It's less of an update, but more of we have a Greater Manchester like local authorities group that discusses consultation and engagement with residents. And one of the key things we discussed was the use of AI within survey results. And so basically, when we get loads of results, like survey responses in, what is the use of AI for that? How can they sort of like deal with like local mannerisms? An example was used to say everyone knows something as a school road, but it's actually an A road going through from there as well. And it was just sort of a discussion on, has anyone used AI for like survey responses and stuff like that as well? And it's just something that, as a like cooperative council innovation network, you know, what is the policy on that and things? I know obviously we mentioned before about that thing as well, but I just thought it might be worth it as a thing that we have discussed at a Greater Manchester level and sort of as an update on that.
Okay, that's a really good question, because we've got our AI report that we launched at the LGA conference October, and you will have in your inbox an invitation to go to a session on the 17th of December. And that's a brilliant question to either ask. You should know, I hope, Rob Gregory from Wigan. So he's the transformation lead. He led on that report because Wigan led on it. You can find the report and the toolkit on the website, but email me and I'll send you the link if it's not clear. But that's a brilliant question, isn't it? Because we all get these survey responses and we wonder. It's so easy to go, yeah, can you clean that for me and give me a nice presentation and tell me what the highlights are. So and that's exactly what the toolkit's about. So yeah, thanks for that question, Connell. Martin.
Hi, can you hear me and see me?
Yep.
Okay, good. We're unable to download Zoom, so I have to join on a web browser, and sometimes it doesn't let me talk or put a video on, but that's good that you can hear and see me. I guess I'm new to this forum, so I'm Martin Bell from Sunderland Borough Council. Apologies for joining late today. I was in another meeting. As you're aware, Councillor Jim Robbins is now the chair of this group, and so he's keen that obviously we have some Swindon attendance. So I've been put forward to be that person. I'm not quite yet sure what involvement I need to have in this space, or what roles people play in other authorities. We don't have a policy function. It's all led by the service areas. So I assume I'll be mainly in a coordinating capacity and bringing the relevant people to policy labs, etc. I've already put people forward for the ones that I'm aware of. But yeah, hopefully over time I'll find my feet and know what value I can add to this group and back to the organisation as well.
Thanks, Martin. You're important. You're like Morgan has been for the last couple of years, being the eyes and ears of the officer group with the chair. So you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Fiona's put a comment in the chat about AI. Okay. Anybody else got an update before I share mine? No. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. So first thing I wanted to say was I'm been a little bit busy the last few weeks with an exec oversight committee and a VMP board tomorrow, and it means that I'm behind on doing stuff for the annual conference. But in the newsletter, when you get it, there is we're seeking workshops this year based on the government missions. Now, as I understand it, tomorrow the government is going to say what its government missions are in a little bit more detail. So I want to include that. So the workshops, of which we'll have 12, I'll be seeking bids based on government missions. At the moment, they're a little bit high level, and I want to make them relatable to local authorities. So if you're doing anything internally on government missions, then you might have a little bit more bandwidth. But I had a message with the chair yesterday, and he said, hang on until Thursday. So tomorrow you'll get the newsletter, because I'll have a little bit more meat for that. Morgan's mentioned the policy labs and prototypes, and also in the newsletter, the timetable for this year's bids will be announced. So you know that that we've got the annual conference in February. What I'm planning on doing is sharing what those we'll go out and we'll ask you to put ideas together. So rather than waiting until the annual conference, we'll do that pre-Christmas. So, and then this slide shows you that we'll say something at the annual conference. The closing date for bids will be the 13th of March. And then we'll have a joint meeting of EOC and VMP on the 19th, 20th of March to consider those bids. Any other questions that are raised by the governance we'll have until the end of March, and then we'll sign off the successful bids beginning of April. I'm really keen on, there aren't elections across the country next year, but I'm really keen that we do all of this pre-PERDA for anybody, so that we don't have issues of we wish we'd have known, and we can't have any conversations on this. So trying to get all of that done and dusted. What the work that Morgan's doing on the policy labs and prototypes, so any lessons learned, we're trying to build that in. So Morgan's presenting to VMP tomorrow on anything that you've said so far, and making sure that they're aware, because as VMP they provide they're the eyes and ears of the organisation to manage policy labs and prototypes through the process. So making sure that what we deliver are projects that align to our values and principles. So there've been, for some unknown reason, this year's been have had more teething problems than in the last 8 years, of different people leaving, couple of people withdrawing or putting changing deadlines and adding a year on. So I'm trying to bring all that back, but I think that resource wise it needs a much more it needs to be handled differently, because councils have got ever dwindling resources. The ones that seem to be most successful, that deliver to time, are the ones where councils have contracted with somebody from the DPS or from the affiliate network. So the fact that we were able to launch the AI Policy Lab at the LGA conference, and that was a project that's very time conscious. It was given approval in April and we launched it in October, so that was it was very quick, because AI is changing all the time. Recognise they're all different, but if you've got any comments on any of that, if you can send them through to Morgan, he would be very grateful indeed. The deadline for the case studies pack for 2025, you'll get this in the newsletter as well. It's the 7th of March. So I spend a lot of my time chasing people. That's not a very good use of my time. So I'm going to keep on and get you. Please think about putting case studies in now. Don't wait until March, and then, because then that has an impact on getting it designed and printed and ready for the events. And then there was one other one that I just wanted to mention. It's a shame that Jonathan Nunn's not on the call, because although I'm pretty sure that is there somebody here from Kirklees still? Is he gone? Gone. And excuse me if I'm saying this wrong. Is it the UKREIIF, UCREIF or something conference? Does anybody go to that? Because we've got an opportunity to have a joint stand because it's the UN International Year of Co-ops next year, and Co-ops UK and the retailers have asked us if we would like to do a joint stand with them. Connell.
Yeah, there's normally like a GM delegation that goes to that. So previously you've had the leader of Trafford, the leader of Salford's been as well, and the chief exec of GMCA. So there is like representatives from there as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've previously done some briefings on this as well. So if you want to have a conversation about that, that's fine.
Brilliant.
As well. Cool.
Okay. Anybody else go? I used to, when I worked for Birmingham, we used to go to MIPIM in Cannes. That was a little bit different for obvious reasons. The sun sort of shone and you went somewhere really nice. But I think it's the same sort of thing. Anybody got any questions on any of those? So annual conference, 12th and 13th, workshops about the government missions, policy labs and prototypes, 13th of March, case studies, 7th of March. No, good. Great. And any other business? No. Okay. You've got 20 minutes of your life back. Go and use it wisely. Another cup of coffee.
Thanks for sharing, Nick. Thanks all. Cheers. Bye.
Bye. See everyone.
Thanks. Bye.